What happens when a royal scandal meets a razor-sharp interviewer in front of millions? Tonight, you're about to witness the beginning of an unforgettable clash between Meghan Markle and Piers Morgan, an interview that started as polite and ended in chaos. By the time this segment was over, the audience was squirming in their seats, and Piers Morgan would face the hardest decision of his broadcasting career. The studio lights glared like 1,000 watchful eyes, bathing the set in an artificial glow that matched the tension hanging in the air. The familiar theme music faded, and the camera zoomed in on Piers Morgan, who adjusted his tie with quiet authority and offered his signature smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back," he began smoothly, his tone polite but firm. "Tonight I'm joined by Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, or as she now prefers to be known, Meghan, independent entrepreneur and advocate." The audience applauded dutifully, though a few in the crowd exchanged wary glances. Meghan entered from stage left, her white silk blouse catching the lights just enough to shimmer beneath a perfectly tailored black blazer. She walked confidently toward her seat, her smile small and calculated, as though she already knew something no one else did. "Meghan," Piers stood to greet her with a handshake. "Thank you for being here." "Of course," she replied, taking her seat and crossing her legs delicately. "Happy to clarify some things. It seems people are always confused about me." Her tone, though calm, carried a faint sneer, already hinting at what was to come. Piers chuckled lightly. "Let's see if we can clear that confusion tonight then. Let me begin with what everyone wants to know, your departure from the royal family. Do you regret leaving, or do you feel it was inevitable?" Meghan tilted her head and blinked slowly, as if the question bored her. "Well," she said coolly, "if you'd been paying attention, you'd know I left because I had better things to do with my life than play dress-up for the tabloids." There was a ripple in the audience, muffled gasps, some nervous laughter. Piers kept his composure. "So you feel the monarchy was simply a spectacle? Then not a duty?" "I think playing dress-up and waving from a balcony is hardly what I'd call duty," she said, her lips curving into a faint smirk. He nodded, jotting something in his notes. "And yet, the monarchy has existed for centuries, upheld by people who seem to see it as more than theatrics. Do you think those who stayed, like William and Kate, are wasting their lives?" "Not my problem," Meghan said, adjusting her cuff. "If they enjoy it, good for them. Some people thrive on irrelevance." That drew a louder murmur from the audience. Piers kept his voice steady. "And yet, Meghan, you benefited from that same irrelevance when you married into it. Do you think you owe it any respect?" Meghan laughed lightly, though it sounded rehearsed. "Oh, please. I gave them a splash of relevance. I brought color, literally and metaphorically." More gasps. Piers merely raised an eyebrow. "Well," he said finally, "you are certainly not shy about your opinions. Let's move to another point then. Your current relationship with the press. Many feel you court publicity when it benefits you and decry it when it doesn't. How would you respond to that?" "I'd say," she began, leaning forward, "that people like you need to learn the difference between privacy and secrecy. But then again, if you understood that, you wouldn't have made a career out of pestering people." That jab landed. Even some audience members flinched, but Piers only smiled faintly. "If that's how you feel, Meghan," he said, his voice calm, "then this is going to be a fascinating evening." And already you could feel the temperature rising in the room. When tension simmers just below the surface, it's only a matter of time before the mask slips. Tonight, Meghan Markle's poised exterior begins to crack under Piers Morgan's unflinching questions, and the studio feels the chill. By the time this segment ended, it wasn't just Meghan who looked uncomfortable. The audience was shifting in their seats, unsure whether to clap, gasp, or walk out themselves. The cameras rolled on as Meghan adjusted the lapel of her black blazer, her smile growing tighter by the minute. Her white blouse glimmered under the studio lights, but her expression betrayed irritation she could no longer fully hide. Piers leaned back in his chair, flipping through his notes with deliberate care. "Let's talk about Harry," he began softly, though his eyes locked on hers with quiet determination. "You and Prince Harry's relationship has been the subject of worldwide fascination. Many people feel he has changed significantly since meeting you. Some even say he's distanced himself from his family because of you. How do you respond to that? Meghan's eyes narrowed just a fraction, though her voice was syrupy sweet. Oh, Piers, I'm sorry you're so invested in someone else's marriage. Are you happy at home? Do you even have a wife? The audience collectively inhaled. Piers kept his composure, smiling faintly. Happily married. Thank you. But we're here to talk about you and Harry. Not me. Of course you are, she replied coolly, because people like you need a villain to keep your ratings up. How quaint. Ignoring the jab, Piers pressed on. Many royal watchers say Harry has become more isolated, more angry, more, for lack of a better word, withdrawn since leaving the UK. Do you feel any responsibility for that? Meghan let out a short laugh, her tone cutting. Oh, you really believe everything you read in the tabloids, don't you? He's happier than he's ever been. I'm sorry if that ruins your narrative. A ripple of uneasy chuckles ran through the crowd. Piers tilted his head, his voice still measured. So, no regrets? No second thoughts about how it's impacted his relationship with his brother? His father? The institution that shaped him? None, Meghan snapped, her tone sharper now. I don't lie awake at night worrying about people who wouldn't lift a finger when I needed them. Is that clear enough for you? Even Piers raised an eyebrow at her tone, but he didn't waver. Crystal, let's move on then. Your work with charities. Some have accused you of using these causes as photo opportunities rather than sincere efforts. How would you respond to that criticism? She uncrossed and recrossed her legs, leaning back with a smirk. Oh, that's rich. People criticize me if I don't show up, then accuse me of vanity if I do. You really can't win when you're me. Piers nodded slowly. Some might say that's the price of being a public figure. Scrutiny comes with the territory. And some might say, Meghan cut in icily, that you wouldn't know sincerity if it bit you in the... Meghan, Piers interrupted gently, please, this is a family show. More gasps and awkward giggles from the audience. Meghan waved a dismissive hand, her painted smile returning. Fine. Let's keep pretending this is civil. Piers smiled faintly at her choice of words but continued. You've also said before that the royal family was cold to you, distant, even cruel at times. But several staffers, off the record of course, have described you as difficult, demanding, even manipulative. How would you respond to those accusations? Her smile vanished completely now, replaced by a flash of anger. I'd say those staffers should grow a spine and say it to my face instead of hiding behind anonymity. Cowards, the lot of them. Even the camera operators seemed to hesitate as they framed the shot, sensing the air thickening with hostility. Yet, Piers pressed, there's a consistent pattern in what they say. Could they all be wrong? They're bitter because I dared to speak my mind, Meghan shot back. Because I wouldn't just nod and smile like a good little duchess while they whispered about me in hallways. For the first time, Piers leaned forward, his voice dropping just slightly. Do you feel you ever made mistakes, that you could have handled things differently? Meghan blinked slowly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Oh, sure, my mistake was ever thinking this family, this institution, or people like you could be decent. An audible gasp came from the front row. But Piers didn't flinch. He straightened his notes calmly, letting her words linger in the air. Meghan, he said finally, voice even, you've made it quite clear what you think of the royal family, the press, and apparently me. But I do have to ask, do you even care what the public thinks anymore? Or is it all just about Meghan now? Her lips curled into a thin, defiant smile. I care about what matters. In public opinion. Frankly, Piers, it doesn't matter. The audience shifted uncomfortably. A few nervous laughs peppered the silence. Piers sat back, his hands clasped calmly on his lap, though his jaw tightened slightly. Well, he said softly, thank you for your honesty. If nothing else, it's illuminating. The cameras cut briefly to commercial, but even then, the tension in the studio was so thick you could almost taste it. By now, the audience wasn't just uneasy, they were squirming. Meghan Markle's thin veneer of charm was slipping fast, and Piers Morgan, though still composed, was clearly nearing his limit. As the minutes dragged on, the tension turned electric. What began as an interview was devolving into a battlefield of pride and ego, with the studio audience caught in the crossfire. The cameras came back from commercial to find Meghan sitting stiffly on her side of the stage, still in her crisp white blouse and tailored black blazer. Her arms were crossed now, her jaw tight, her eyes flicking away from Piers as he shuffled his notes with deliberate calm. The air in the studio was different now, colder, heavier. Even the audience seemed quieter, uncertain if they should keep clapping between segments. Piers looked up with that trademark smile, tight, professional, but his eyes betrayed a certain resolve. "Welcome back," he began smoothly, his voice as measured as ever. "We're here with Meghan Markle, discussing her journey, her work, and her views on, well, nearly everything." Meghan exhaled through her nose, her lips forming a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover," she said flatly. "Oh, I wouldn't say that," Piers replied lightly. "We've only just begun." A few uneasy chuckles from the audience. Piers leaned slightly forward. "Let's talk about your departure from the royal family. You've said before that you felt trapped, stifled, unprotected. Do you believe the monarchy itself is fundamentally flawed?" Meghan uncrossed her legs and leaned back with a dry laugh. "You really can't help yourself, can you? Always digging, always trying to find fault." Piers tilted his head, unbothered. "It's a question, Meghan, not a fault. Do you believe the monarchy is flawed?" Her eyes flashed and she rolled them dramatically. "I believe the monarchy is outdated. It's a relic, and I chose not to let it destroy me the way it's destroyed so many others. That clear enough for you?" The audience stirred, some whispering, others glancing at each other nervously. Piers nodded slowly. "Crystal," he said, "but do you ever consider that perhaps, just perhaps, the problem wasn't entirely the institution, but how you approached it?" Meghan's laugh this time was sharp. "Oh, of course, blame the woman. How original." "I didn't say blame," Piers countered calmly. "I said consider. Do you take any responsibility for how things unfolded?" Her smirk returned, but it was colder now. "I take responsibility for putting myself first for once in my life, something you and apparently half of Britain seem to have a real problem with." More shifting in the audience. The tension was palpable now. Piers pressed on, undeterred. "Let's move on to your media ventures. The podcast, the Netflix deals, the children's book. Some critics say it seems more like a personal rebrand than meaningful work. How would you respond to that?" Meghan's eyebrows arched high. "Well, Piers, critics always have something to say, don't they? When I was silent, I was a coward. When I spoke up, I was calculating. Maybe the problem is less about me and more about people like you who can't stand a woman in control." Piers folded his hands in front of him, still calm, but his eyes were noticeably sharper now. "Or perhaps," he said quietly, "the problem is when someone confuses control with entitlement. Do you think your critics might have a point?" Her laugh was bitter this time. "You'd love that, wouldn't you? If I just admitted I was the villain you've always wanted me to be. Sorry to disappoint you." A faint murmur of discomfort swept through the audience. Even the crew members behind the cameras exchanged uneasy glances. Piers kept his gaze steady. "It's not about villains and heroes. It's about choices and consequences." Meghan leaned forward now, her tone openly mocking. "Oh, thank you, Piers. Enlighten me about consequences, because clearly you're the expert on public relations disasters." A few awkward laughs from the back of the audience, but most were stone silent. Piers smiled thinly. "I've certainly had my share, but unlike you, I've never tried to play the victim while cashing in on the role." That line hit hard. Meghan's eyes narrowed to slits. "Wow," she said, her voice low and dripping with disdain. "You really think you've got me all figured out, don't you? The bitter old man with his little TV show finally gets his chance to take down the Duchess." "That's not what this is," Piers said firmly, though his jaw was set now. "Really?" Meghan scoffed, throwing up her hands. "Because it sure feels like a witch hunt to me. Maybe next you'll ask if I float when you throw me in the river." The audience gasped audibly at the remark, and Piers actually blinked at the audacity of it. He took a long breath before speaking again. his voice quiet but laced with steel. You know, he said evenly, I came into this interview hoping to have an honest conversation about the choices you've made, the legacy you're building. But it's becoming increasingly clear that you're not interested in honesty, Meghan, just in playing the same tired game of deflect and insult. Meghan smirked and crossed her arms. Oh, please, spare me the self-righteous lecture. You're just mad I'm not crying into your shoulder like the rest of your guests. The audience was dead silent now. The temperature in the room had dropped noticeably, and the camera zoomed in on Piers as he sat perfectly still, his fingers tapping once on the desk. Well, he said finally, his voice deceptively calm, I think we've given you plenty of time to show the world who you really are, and you haven't disappointed. Meghan arched an eyebrow and leaned back, clearly pleased with herself. Piers offered the faintest of smiles. Let's take another break, he said quietly, and the cameras cut to commercial, but not before they captured the glint of something dangerous in his eyes. When the cameras came back from commercial, the air in the studio was thick with tension, like a storm cloud about to burst. Meghan sat with her arms folded defiantly, and Piers, though still outwardly composed, had fire in his eyes. What started as a high-profile interview had turned into a slow-motion implosion, one that nobody in the studio would ever forget. The red light on the camera blinked back to life, and the audience, still hushed, offered a half-hearted round of applause. Meghan sat rigid in her chair, adjusting the sleeves of her crisp white blouse under the black blazer, her chin held high. Piers leaned slightly forward, his hands folded neatly on the desk in front of him. His trademark smile was gone, replaced by a taut line across his face. Welcome back, he said evenly, though his voice carried a weight that suggested this segment would be different. We're here with Meghan Markle, though it seems the conversation we hope to have tonight has taken quite a turn. Meghan rolled her eyes so dramatically that a few audience members actually gasped. Oh, don't act like you're surprised, Piers, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. This is exactly the kind of gotcha spectacle you live for, isn't it? Piers cocked his head slightly. Actually, Meghan, what I live for is asking real questions and getting real answers. Something you seem determined not to give. Her lips curved into a smug smile. Maybe that's because your questions aren't worth answering. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, wow, under their breath. Piers took a breath, visibly fighting to maintain composure. All right, he said coolly. Let's try one more time. Earlier, you said you left the royal family because you were trapped and stifled. Fine, but do you ever reflect on the fact that you knew, or should have known, what you were walking into? Do you take any responsibility for that choice? Meghan gave a dry laugh. Ah, yes, the classic blame the woman narrative. She should have known her place. How original. This isn't about place, Piers said firmly.